Okay, today we're going to discuss hate groups within the U.S. and the actual descriptions of them. And first, we have to discuss basically what they are first, because a lot of people try to blame certain groups with it, and frankly, that doesn't really fit to any type of reasonable description of what a hate group really is. Now, first of all, is really what we should decide is that bigotry, racism against a specific group that has actually been, or by actual individuals, that has actually been specifically proven, not just labeled as allegations, should be one thing that should be looked at, but not just and where it actually can be proven, and this is something where you can actually state, and then and then we should actually look back at the actual origin of these groups, not just coming up with some type of allegation where they link to, not necessarily, because if you look at it with it, you're not necessarily going to be finding out that it's not going to be really where you want to look to see where it's coming from. First of all, is one of the groups tracking it is the Southern Poverty Law Center. Well, here's a little thing about them. If you look where they first came about, is initially the lawyers that founded it, their first cases were actually defending the KKK against people filing cases against them. Now, if we're looking at a group that's going to be very, very helpful for establishing a hate map, getting groups that were actually started by defending the KKK is not exactly a group that you want to look as a great group. Now, if we look back at the history of the KKK, this was essentially the militant arm of the Democratic Party. There's plenty of proof to prove this. This goes back well into the 1800s. And while many people want to say there was a switch of parties, if you look at election results, there was nothing to prove any such thing. There was no switch of the parties to prove that anything but the Democratic Party was linked to the KKK. This even happened even as late as even into the 1980s and even part of the 1990s. Even Robert Byrd, who was a KKK recruiter, was even praised by the Clintons during his funeral. This should show you how vastly linked to the Democratic Party the KKK is. And it should show you that the KKK really is linked and always was linked to the Democratic Party. So when they try to come up with this idea the KKK switched, it never really did. When it comes out to the idea of this alt-right, or what they try to deem as an alt-light. Alt-light is really their tag word for anybody that tends to be a libertarian conservative that they really don't want to hear from, because it upsets the order of the two-party system. Now, frankly, these people are basically ones they want to deem as outcasts, and it's basically so what they do is they try to link them with what they deem as the alt-right. The alt-right, really, all they are basically where the Democratic Party decided it wasn't beneficial to be linked with the KKK anymore in the 1990s. Going into the late 1990s, what they did is they decided, hey, this is not such a great link, is we need to find change in motto for our party. So they decided to change it up and go for this idea of diversity. Well, it's not real diversity, it's just they just wanted to pander to minorities. As you see, they're not looking for actually benefiting minorities, but actually just pandering to them to get their votes. And what happened was, when they did this, a whole group of people that was actually in this group of the KKK type of view but weren't necessarily directly affiliated with the KKK end up being left out in the cold. So these people essentially tried to what it called gravitate toward a lot of these viewpoints, and they essentially what the left did was they branded them the alt-right, which is essentially these viewpoints they didn't like, so they wanted to brand their enemy, the Republican Party, with them, so it would look very, very bad. This is nothing more than a political tactic, and it's really nothing more than that. These aren't people that actually believe in conservative ideas. These are people that believe in universal health care. They believe in ideas of paid daycare. These are people that do not believe in much of the ideas of the Republican Party. They actually believe in basically in the Democratic platform. The only difference is they believe in a white-only Democratic platform. And this is the only difference between them and the actual Democrats themselves. And this is where you're finding this. This is actually something you would deem as a hate group, but they're not actually linked with people who are actually people who you would call on the right side. You would actually call them left-wingers because their actual viewpoints are left-wing. They're what you would call traditional progressives. They're just basically pro-white traditional progressives. And this is the whole point of what we're trying to grasp across with this. Now, just like that, with it, any type of group that's actually advocating for racial superiority, and it doesn't matter if you believe that God chose you, such as you'll find a lot of religious groups that will do this. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim or whatever. If you believe that you're the chosen people over any other group, I'm sorry to tell you, but that is actually bigotry toward other groups, because you need to understand that there is no chosen people. That if God created one group, if God created everybody on earth and all creatures on earth, that means there is no chosen people. That means we should be the overseers of the whole world with it, and thus everyone is classified as the chosen people. That means there is no specific group as the chosen group of people. Anybody proclaiming such a thing is really coming out of left field, and they're really kind of talking nonsense. Even if you look at the actual Bible, it never proclaims any such group as a chosen people other than those who actually believe in God himself. And this is this would actually show that there is no group that could proclaim itself through any type of line as such. And anybody saying racially if they're superior is what it called is another form of hate group. I don't care if you're black, white, whatever. There is no form of superiority from race. This is just an absurd argument that people will try and make to basically validate their opinions of hate. And what you also find is this word for basically punishing actions of the past. Well, frankly, the people who lived during these actions of the past, being slavery in such as the United States, these people aren't alive anymore. Basically, all you're doing is stealing from modern day people. And the idea of such things as affirmative action and what you're calling reverse racism, there is no such thing as reverse racism. It's just racism. You're just stealing from other people. If you're not the most qualified person in this country for a position, you do not deserve that position. Plain and simple. It doesn't matter if we're talking about white, black, Asian, Latino, whatever. If you're not the most qualified, you don't deserve it. And it doesn't matter if we say, oh, but what if this class is going to be filled with East Asians? Well, good. If they're the most qualified, they deserve it. If it's only going to be filled with East Asians, then they're the ones who deserve it most. And there's a reason why. If they're going to be working the hardest. Take, for example, with the idea of Filipino immigrants. There's a reason why they make 1.5 times the amount that any other immigrant makes when they come to this country, because they're willing to work their butts off when they get here, and they're willing to basically pass that trait on to their kids. Now, if you're going to be here, basically be lazy about it and not willing to work your butt off, then you don't deserve a damn thing. And this is the way it works. There is no there should be no handouts to people based on the color of their skin, based on what they believe, based on their race, based on anything. It should be how hard are you willing to work. And that's why when people say, oh, that's being hateful. No, it's not being hateful. And we don't have this hate that people want to come out and say. Now, we do have different situations that people are in, but this comes into a thing called policy. What are the policies that people are growing up in? And this is something that we need to look into. Now, basically, the policies are coming from a lot of these major cities. Now, if you look at it, basically, why are black males being incarcerated at a lot of higher rates? Well, this is goes back to both the war on drugs, and it also goes back onto a lot of the basic policies of the Great Society of pumping in a lot of welfare and public aid through food stamps, and through a lot of the thing of saying, yeah, you can have 50 million kids, you'll support them, and do all this irresponsible behavior. And guess what? We have basically high criminal rates that are well higher than any other group. We're talking, when we come to blacks, it's they can say, oh, blacks are more likely to be killed by police, but the fact is, if you look at it, a black person is between 2.2 to 2.8 times more than a white or even a Hispanic to be killed by to kill another human being, regardless of race. And basically, is 96% of all blacks are killed by other blacks, and this is a fact. It's not something that's made up. Now, while there's a couple of states that have, this is from the Wall Street Journal during the Obama administration, while there were a couple of states such as California and Florida that refused to provide all of the data enough to make it substantial, there were 48 other states that did. And of these states, this is what came about, and it was very, very consistent between each of the states, between 2.2 to 2.8 times that of a white or a Hispanic per their percentage of the population. And this was a standard thing in each of the states. It didn't vary. Whites pretty much stayed at between a 0.8 to a 1.2 times for their population, and that was the same thing for Hispanics as well. Hispanics did not rise much above that. I mean, the highest in what it called in areas would have been like in areas like Arizona and Texas, which it didn't even rise above like 1.4. which is still not anywhere close. Asians didn't even rise above like a 0.5, which is showing why you're finding people like that are not committing these crimes and not having issues. So when you have these things of families breaking apart, kids going out killing other people on the street, for basic stupid reasons in gangland violence. When you're having this stuff happen, when you're basically living off welfare and other public aid systems and not actually trying to make a better living for yourself and not having the motivation to do so, this is what happens. You end up basically creating a system of homicide. And you can do stuff about this in policy. You need to get the government to end these public aid systems so you can basically create a better life for yourself. Now that this is going to basically eliminate a lot of these issues. And this is going to, now while your Democratic congressmen or senators are going to say, no, don't do that because then you're not going to have anything to live on. Well, the fact is this is what created the problem in the first place. Eliminate the problems in the first place, because the more money you ask for, that means the more money is taken out of your community. You need the money to actually develop wealth naturally in your community. This means you need actual entrepreneurs in your community. You need to go out and actually make something of yourself. This is the way things happen. And you can't blame white people, Asian people, whatever. They're or Hispanic people. These ones are actually going out and making things from their community. Everyone else, you can't say that they're not doing anything about it. Well, the fact is you have to do something about it in your own communities. When you're killing each other and creating these problems and making them worse, that's only going to continue with the issues. And when you vote the same people in over and over and over again that are promising you the same stuff and you're going nowhere, you need to realize that that's the reason why you're going nowhere and things are only getting worse. And you can't say, oh, it's the other side who's hateful. Well, they're not hateful. And this is why they're gonna be much more desperate to actually put things on it, like such as a simple thing as an actual slogan like "Make America Great Again." Really, are we really going to boil down to, oh, "Make America Great Again" is really a hateful slogan? It was basically derived from a Ronald Reagan slogan, and under him, the actual economy got better from what we had under Jimmy Carter. Are we really going to say that the situation is worse for people when black unemployment is plummeting, when Hispanic unemployment is plummeting, and the actual people are getting back to work? This should not be the case. We should be actually looking at the situation and saying looking at it and saying we need to look how to fix these problems in these areas and look at the actual issues, not saying, oh, this is a hate group because we don't like a hat. Really, a hat? That this is where we come to. These aren't hate groups. Hate groups are the ones that are actually going out and saying, you're not good enough because of your color, you're not good enough because of your beliefs. These groups are they'll say anytime they'll say the words they'll say that they're privileged. Anytime you hear the words privileged or this group is not good enough because of their color, anytime you hear that, that is bigotry and racism. Those groups are bigots and racists. Plain and simple. There is no privilege, except in the situation you grew up in. Now, what we can do is we can basically go up and plead the judicial system to end people being able to plead affluenza, which doesn't exist. It's just a way of saying, I'm too rich to go to jail. Now, we can end that, which I think everybody of all colors and beliefs would approve of. But we don't need to actually say that privilege actually exists. When people say white privilege or this privilege or that privilege, it doesn't exist. It's all a bunch of hogwash. and it's derived just to basically cause division amongst people. You're always going to have some type of benefit that you can use, and these are just individual benefits that happen in normal societies. I mean, you're going to have certain things that you do better than that guy, then that guy is going to do better than you, and these are certain things with it, and you don't get these by the color of your skin. Anybody that tells you that is a racist. Anybody that tells you that for your gender or your beliefs is a bigot. And if we continue looking at this, we need to look at and say that anybody that's actually pushing this, we should ignore them and actually cast them as basically the source of hate. And if we want to really look at where the source of hate is coming from these people who want to cause division by using these code words of basically trying to brand people either as these hateful people without any proof, or trying to use terms like privilege. Privilege is basically a way of either privilege or saying or trying to use the thing of saying use minorities as basically a term of people who can't get ahead naturally. Well, that's not the case. Anybody can do it. They just need to work hard. And it doesn't matter whether this is the way identity politics works. When you use that and you see these people using it, it's a bunch of hogwash. These people are setting up their whole political system based on hate. These are very, very hateful people. Whenever somebody says these groups are underprivileged people or any types of things like that, or they're pushing for affirmative action, these people are saying that that group of people is not capable of doing anything on their own. If you have the next one that says those groups of people are privileged, they're saying that basically those groups of people are capable of doing actions on their own. Basically, they're basically calling out their own racism, and no one's willing to basically state it out there because they're saying, oh, but they mean well. This isn't they mean well. They don't mean well. They're trying to take advantage of these people and for their basically inability to actually point out the facts that they're actually pointing out of themselves. Affirmative action isn't about helping people. Affirmative action is about telling people they're incapable of doing basic tasks. They're telling them that they can't do anything right and that they need help. No, these people are perfectly capable of doing anything right, and if they're not up to the level of where they would be put, they need to be at the level that they need to be at. Putting them up at a higher level would actually be catastrophic for their level of skill. This would only be catastrophic for the company that they're at, the school that they're at, and it would take a spot away from someone who's deserving. What needs to be said is we need people who are deserving at these positions and not people who are undeserving. And this is what needs to be said, not people who think that they're trying to make good by trying to basically create hate in the world by trying to cause division. The hate is all caused by basically people who want socialism, people who want communism, and people who are basically think they're racially or religiously superior. This is all where it comes from. When people who basically want religious inclusivity and who basically want individuality of being able to choose who you can serve, who you cannot, those are the people who are actually the ones who are against hate. And those are the people who should actually be respected. If they say they can't do a good job with it because they're just not fully artistically into the project, you need to respect that. And this is the thing where you'll find some groups that just don't, and some groups that'll actually aim for those people to actually pick a fight because they know it'll be a good news story. And this is where we need to stop this. And there's That's why there's a big difference between hate and actually picking fights with it. We need to stop picking fights and actually get down to eliminating these hateful groups. That's why when we find these groups that are willing to essentially push for the idea of murdering infants, which is really what the abortion industry is about, actually pushing for war, which is as murdering young people because they want to sell a few weapons, and then pushing anybody that wants to push for the death penalty because they're unwilling to look at other options. Now, while I do believe in states' rights with it, I don't believe that that should be an option. And we should look into the policies that actually cause a lot of these problems. Now, why do we have so much of these issues? Is because the fact is because when you look at what happened judicially during the 60s and 70s, and politically during this period, and even back into the turn of the century, going into the progressive era, you had a lot of people who did not know what the hell they were doing, and they wanted to basically intervene in people's lives. And this is where we got what we have today. And we have basically programs that have ruined people's lives just because they felt that they knew better than others. What ends up and this is where we end up creating this. And all these people that essentially thought that they knew better than other people were all backed by the same hate groups. When you look at Lyndon Baines Johnson, he was backed by the KKK. When you look back to guys like FDR, he was backed by the KKK. When you look back to Woodrow Wilson, backed by the KKK. All of these people, they were all backed by the same type of hateful people. Any of these people, when you try to look at them and you try to find out what they're backed by extremist hate groups. Any person that wants to basically take control of your life, you should basically say, hey, why are they doing that? Why would they want to basically take control of my life? Any group that basically that says, hey, you should be able to have full control of your life, that is a group that would not be a hate group, because a hate group doesn't want to do that. And a hate group would never want gun control. A group against hate would never want gun control. Hate groups always want gun control. This is why the KKK always pushed for it, because they knew if they had the guns and the blacks didn't, you could easily shoot them. And this is why gun control was always pushed. This is why you found it with all the socialist systems, such as in National Socialist Germany. This is why you found in the communist Soviet Union. You found it in communist China, and this is why, because the fact is there couldn't be an uprising. This is why you also find it in socialist Venezuela. Now, because they know that the people can't fight back. Because if they try to fight back, they're just going to get shot by the military. And this is the whole purpose of gun control, is to disarm the citizens so they can't fight back when a leader wants to step everything up. And that's why you have all hate groups are linked to this idea of a bigger government. If you want to eliminate the hate groups, you have to go to a smaller government. Why? Because smaller government means that even if they want to function, they have no ability to gain power, because there's no power to grab. And if there's no power to grab, it means they're basically useless. That they basically, if they want to harass someone, they're going to have to do so at their own risk, and probably die doing so. This is how things function. And I hope you like the video. If you do, like, subscribe, and click the bell. If you can, share it with someone else to help the channel spread. See you tomorrow, everybody.